Welcome to the Jerry Bovino Show. And now, here's Jerry.
Jerry Bovino. We are back with H. Lee Shapiro, the relationship guy. You're going to find out how to improve your relationship if you have a bad one, how to keep it good if you have a good one. We're going to talk about the things that ruin relationships. We're going to talk about the things that can make them better. Lee, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Great. So you got your Hawaii shirt on,
Yes.
huh? What's the Hawaii? First of all, why do all the tourists buy those shirts?
Because I think there's something about Hawaiian shirts that represents just being relaxed and having fun, and that's what I like to do.
Yeah, but you know what happens is every time I go to Hawaii, you find one of these flowered, colorful shirts, which you think is going to look great in Maui, but then you get back to wherever you live and it stays in your closet forever.
Well, sometimes so. Actually, some of my best Hawaiian shirts I've bought here in Aspen. So.
Oh, there you go. Boogie's, right? Boogie's
Right,
has all
that's
kinds
right.
of cool shirts like that. So, Lee, you have 30 years of experience in dealing with relationship problems. Is that a fair
That's right,
statement?
yes.
Tell us a little bit about your background. How did we get to this point?
Oh, well, actually, I started way back. My first career was as an engineer, and then I was a hospital administrator, and then I got kind of put off by the politics in hospital administration, and I left that, and then I became an artist. But in my background as an engineer, I was also very interested in relationships and organizational development, so I had a lot of background in that area. And then in the 70s, I did a lot of work and training in counseling, and then in 1979, I started teaching seminars in conflict resolution in relationships, and focusing more on the counseling. But I still do my art as well as doing counseling and teaching these seminars.
Okay, that's sort of a nice, because artists have this sort of mellow, good karma about the world, most of them that I know anyway. And so maybe that sort of translates a little bit and comes across in your relationship counseling. But what about your own relationships? Does this help you when you have a problem?
Absolutely.
Do you actually think to yourself, I have to use points 3, 4, and 6 when I'm fighting with my significant other, or?
Yeah, and the major thing though the focus that I do in my seminars, which is now called The Art of Melting Conflict, is really about coming into a centered place. But the techniques that I work with in terms of conflict resolution come up for me all the time. And it's not just in my romantic relationship with my sweetheart. It also comes up in business relationships and family relationships. So the material applies to all kinds of relationships.
Yeah, it applies to sort of getting what we want out of life by giving something back. And I like the way you entitle your seminars, Fighting Fair in Relationships, because a lot of people don't fight that fair, right?
Right.
And we're going to go through, after the break, we're going to go through some of the reasons that people sort of use the relationship to be maybe manipulative or exploitive, or to get more out of the relationship than they put in.
Right.
So is there one theme in your experience in 30 years that defines a successful relationship?
Well, I think, when you say successful relationship, I think that we have to accommodate our humanness, and we've had a lot of conditioning. So, I feel it's successful when I reach a consciousness about what's going on. And so I'm not just run by the old patterns, but at a certain point where I want to control somebody, and then I realize what I'm wanting to do, and I stop for a second and, really look at what really works for me, and then go with what works rather than my old conditioning.
Yeah, I see that you have controlling behaviors as one of the, I guess, the stumbling blocks in relationships.
Right.
And why is it, do you think, that so many, I wouldn't say of us, because I don't know that you and I fit in that category, but why is so many people want to have control of a relationship, and why do some people want to relinquish control?
Right. Well, first of all, I think what we're really trying to control are difficult feelings. And so a lot of times in relationships, things come up that touch off difficult feelings for us, and we want to control those feelings. And so for most of us, when difficult feelings come up, we go to one of 4 types of behaviors when our intention is to try to protect ourselves from those feelings. And there's another intention that's a possibility that I'll talk about in a little bit. But when our intention is to try to protect ourselves from those feelings and fears, then what we'll do is we'll go to one of 4 types of behaviors. One is controlling. And there's lots of ways that we try to control in relationships. And I'll talk about those in a moment. Then also compliance. So compliance is where we give ourselves up and we sort of say, well, I'll make your feelings or your needs more important than mine if you don't leave me or if you don't get angry with me.
But that can backfire too, though, because then you're always feeling like you're the one.
Right. None of these really bring us the satisfaction and the connection that we're looking for, these behaviors. The third one is resistance, and the fourth one is where we just shut down our feelings or tune out or become, push it into the subconscious.
Okay, so now are you living in Aspen or in Hawaii now?
Yes.
Both. Okay, you go between.
Right.
Where are you in Hawaii?
I'm in Kihei in Maui.
Okay, beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Someone told me that everybody is just like, I was in Maui on a surgical seminar recently, and we have a friend who retired there. He said, everybody is just so mellow. It's like...
It is very mellow.
Is it more mellow than Aspen?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you like that sort of beach mountain?
I love the combination. You know, I mean, in the summertime, for me, there's nothing like Aspen. I mean, with the music festival and all the things happening here. And but in the winter time, I love windsurfing, and I like the energy, the laid-back energy in Maui. And so they're both
but
good.
isn't it terribly expensive to live there? Or
coming from Aspen.
Yeah, well, nothing is. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a short break to recognize our underwriters who very generously support us here at Grassroots Television. Twin Peaks Real Estate down in Denver. If you need a home, condo, loft, pied-à-terre, please give them a call. Houston and Gorog, extremely experienced realtors right here next to Caribou Alley. Kimberly Wells and Independence Properties, spanning the divide, special expertise in riverfront and unique properties. Eric Berg and Morris and Fearwald, and Zuri Health Drink. Rao Antiques down in New Orleans on Royal Street, www.msrao.com. Bishop Plumbing, Heating and Air Conditioning, and most importantly, the Susan G. Komen Breast Cancer Foundation. We're going to take a short break. We're going to come back, and Lee Shapiro, with 30 years of experience in relationship counseling, is going to tell us how to get along by fighting fair. We'll be right back. Bovino, we're back with H. Lee Shapiro, the relationship guy. He teaches seminars on how to fight fair in relationships. Not everybody wants to fight fair. Some people just want to win, Lee.
Right.
But ultimately, that could lead to disaster down the road if you're always winning. I think there probably has to be some give and take in relationships, huh?
Absolutely. You know, the difficulty is calling it fighting fair makes it sound like there's a right or wrong to it, and it's really not about a right or wrong. It's just that it has consequences, and that so when we try to control and we dominate the other person, ultimately it doesn't serve us. And so, you know, it's really about what works in relationships. So
yeah, and some people have sort of this overwhelming personality where they can dominate others, and you see that a lot when you have sort of an older man marry a younger woman, and then in the beginning it seems to work because she wants the force of his knowledge, experience, personality, and then with time I've seen it where they rebel.
Right, yeah.
We'll talk about that a little later, the rebellious younger woman who's not going to take that crap anymore.
Right.
So, and Lee is having a seminar here in Aspen on August 4th on fighting fair in relationships. If you have any interest in it, you can give him a call for some more information at 925-5035, 925-5035. So, but this isn't an infomercial. We're trying to inform our Aspen viewers. So let's start out now and just say, what percentage of relationships have measurable problems in your judgment?
Oh boy, I think everyone has some difficulty because the most of us have not seen models for what it looks like to have an intention to learn, to grow, to heal. For most of us, we've learned how to protect ourselves in some way in relationships, and in doing so, we shut our hearts down. And so, you know, usually in the beginning of the relationship, it's all rosy, but then the shadow stuff comes forward, and you know, and then how we deal with that is part of what the relationships are about. And that's where we learn is when the rubber meets the road, so to speak.
And the relationship configurations that you're teaching here, they apply not just to married couples, but people who are dating. I assume homosexual couples could use the same skills. There's nothing gender specific about this.
No, and it's not just not just romantic relationships either. It's also in our business relationships. You see people pushing, dominating, trying to control, and in family relationships, there's all kinds of manipulations that go on. So how to work with that? How to set good boundaries around that? How to work with someone else that is used not fighting fair? How to work with someone like that? That's always very interesting.
How important is it if two people, let's just say it's a husband and wife for the sake of discussion, if two people are having a disagreement, how important is it to bring in a third party to help mediate, arbitrate?
Oh, I think that's extremely helpful. You know, for one thing, in a lot of the counseling I do, what I see is that it's like people are speaking different languages. They're not really hearing each other. And so to have a third party that can really listen and help to communicate, help to translate what's being said is very, very helpful.
There's an old aphorism that the three things that people fight about in marriage are money, children, and sex.
Right.
Is that pretty much, in your experience, does that pretty much cover it?
That's true. That's where most of our fears are connected with those areas. And so that's what people fight about.
But counseling can help in each one of those areas.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Does one of the three dominate in your experience, or does it depend on the couple?
It really depends on the couple. Yeah. So, but when they can really explore what's underneath those issues, because they're really not like when they're arguing about money. It's really not about money. It has a lot to do with self-esteem. It has a lot to do with feeling unlovable. And so those are the core issues that get touched off, or security that gets touched off when they talk about money.
He would allow me to buy this whatever if he really loved me.
Right.
So it's some internalization, a lack of love.
Right.
And then you put the guilt, she puts the guilt back on him. If you really love me.
Right.
And it's an interesting, well, let's start at the beginning. Let's start, you've got a list of controlling behaviors here.
Right.
Let's start with blame. Define that.
So blaming is where I'm making someone else responsible for my feelings. You know, you make me feel so angry or whatever. That's the blame, which is not the truth, because the truth is that what they're doing may touch off feelings from me from the past, but it's really not causing those feelings.
So in the end, we're responsible for our own feelings.
Right. I mean, you have two different people, and you know, for someone might say something to one person and they'll react one way, and to someone else the same thing could be said and they'll react differently. So we're responsible for our own feelings and reactions.
And now shame and guilt.
Right. So shaming and guilt, guilt is a type of shaming. But trying to instill guilt on someone else, like saying you should be ashamed of yourself, or you're wrong, or we use name calling to instill shame. And so it's a control mechanism. It's trying to control them in some way. And the belief is that if I can just shame them, then I can dominate them and get them to do a behavior
what I want. Most of
this
this comes down to trying to get someone to do what you want, doesn't it?
Right.
Which isn't always so easy.
Well, you know what we haven't done a lot is just to be straight with someone and put out a straight request, you know. And so, like, a lot of times we have a belief that unless I shame them, I won't get it done. So we'll say things like, you never take out the garbage, you lazy so-and-so, instead of saying, you know, I'd really appreciate if you would take the garbage out. Would you be willing to do that? It's a whole different energy.
Yeah, that is an energy. How important is the way you say something, not just what you say?
Well, I think we communicate more with energies, with intention, than with our words. You know, I used to think, well, if I could just say the right words, I could get these results. But it's really, I think it's more the energetic. When I'm in fear and I'm pushing, you know, energetically with someone, that creates a equal and opposite response.
And how often, Lee, does something happen in a relationship where there's a tiny little thing that triggers a disproportionately unexpected response?
Right.
Because, you know, the classic story is the guy who goes in to ask his boss for a raise. And he's already told himself that the boss is going to be nasty, he's not going to give him a raise, he's not going to appreciate all the work. And instead of walking in and asking what's wrong. He walks in and punches the boss in the face.
Right.
And sometimes, I know this. I do this myself. Sometimes I'm thinking, well, I know how she's going to react to this. I know how he's going to react to this.
Right.
And then I've got it all that no matter how they react, I'm ready to jump on them.
Right. Yeah. So when we're in fear and our body is in fear, we're kind of disconnected from our deeper wisdom, and we're coming in with an energy that's defensive, that's pushing, and often it elicits an opposite response to that.
Yeah, the people feel it. And also, one of the things that I have a hard time doing is when I get excited, you want to raise your voice. You should actually probably be lowering your voice.
Well, yelling is another control mechanism that, it's another dominating thing that we've learned, that if I can just raise my voice and yell at them, then I can intimidate them and get what I want.
Right.
So,
yeah.
There's a story I like to tell about that really illustrates a lot of these behaviors. That my family went down to Lake Powell one year, about 15 years ago, and my dad, we had reserved a boat, a houseboat, and the boat wasn't there for us. So my dad got real angry, and he yelled at the boat guy, and then he got into something with my sister, and he came to me, and much to his credit, my dad said, Lee, I noticed I've been feeling really irritable lately, and I yelled at the boat guy, and I yelled at your sister. He said, what do you think about that? And I thought it was great that my dad could ask that kind of question. And I said, well, Dad, I think you have a belief that you can control people with your anger. And he looked at that and he said, yeah, but sometimes I can control people with my anger. And I said, yes, in the short run you might have a sense of control, but in the long run, look at what it costs you. Tomorrow when you may dominate Rhonda, my sister, today, and tomorrow when you want to go hike with her, she'll say, no, Dad, I don't want to hike with you. And that hurts, And to the boat guy, to a part of you that feels helpless inside, because those are the feelings that get touched off, is helplessness. To that part, it feels great to puff yourself up and show your anger. But to another part of you that knows that you've just damaged a fellow human being who's innocent, to that part, it really cuts deeply, and it erodes your self-esteem. And when you realize what it costs you to try to get what you want that way, you'll find another way of getting what you really want.
Yeah, it's interesting because I write a column in Retina Times, which is for retina surgeons, about patient care. I have 30 years of experience in patient care, and one of the columns I wrote recently was about dealing with difficult patients. And the point of my column was that difficult people are difficult because it helps them get what they want. They have a lifetime of experience teaching them that they can wear you down by being difficult.
That's
so
right.
I always say, don't fight with a difficult patient. He loves it. He's going to be better at it than you are. And you're going to lose.
Right.
Just learn to, there's some times where you just have to pick your battles, don't you?
Right, and also there's a way of, one thing I'm really interested in is Aikido, is a martial art. Somebody throws a fist at you, you don't want to push against that fist because then you're in a power struggle, and that's what happens a lot. But if learning how to work with that energy and how to flip it around rather than matching it, so getting into an argument with someone that's being argumentative is just going to get you into a power struggle.
So you use their energy sort of against them in an Aikido metaphor.
Well, in a way, you're not using it against them, because in Aikido, there's a belief that as soon as you have a mindset of wanting to hurt somebody, you've broken your connection to the universe and you've already lost. So how do you render the attacker harmless to you without damaging them? And that's an art.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, well, name calling, you don't want to say to somebody, you fat, lazy slob, all you do is drink beer all day, sit in front of the TV. That's probably not going to produce the desired result.
No, it's going to make them defensive. It's going to, it's trying to dominate. It's a dominating behavior, and it ultimately does not bring us to a place of connectedness, and there's no learning when we do that type of
Okay,
control.
now yelling and hitting. Yelling,
Yeah.
clearly, the people want to dominate with their voice. But
Right.
hitting in this day and age, it's still something that we have to deal with.
Yeah.
It's
People
hard
do
to
it.
believe, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if you're advising now, you have a woman who her husband has actually physically hit her, that not only is that a criminal act, but why do women stay with a guy like that? I don't understand it.
Oh, well, because of their background, sometimes, there's a lot of different reasons of what that might be for individual women. For some women, that's a way of getting some attention, And for others, they don't believe, they're so afraid of being alone that they might stay. So there might be a combination of reasons why someone would allow them to be in a relationship that's abusive. So,
Okay. Have you counseled couples like
yes,
that? And is it the man's, ultimately it seems like his helplessness and inability to his feelings of inferiority maybe that cause him to want to do that?
Right. I mean, it's a desperate attempt to control some difficult feelings inside. And on some level, just like with my dad, on some level he believes it works because it has worked to an extent in the past to dominate and so that he doesn't have to have certain feelings. But ultimately it doesn't work, and it will destroy his relationship, it'll destroy his self-esteem, and so, you know, that we have to look at the long run.
Now let's talk about the silent treatment. That's
Okay.
one, to me, the worst of all is when you get the silent treatment. That's like death by Chi-Chi. Tell me about the silent treatment.
So the silent treatment is again, it's a manipulative tool, and it sort of it offers a threat, and it says, if you're going to be that way, then I'm going to take my energy away, I'm not going to talk to you, and I'm going to punish you by being silent. And you know, again, it's another controlling behavior that doesn't really work in the long run.
Yeah, it just seems like for people like me that like to talk things out, you know, that's the worst. But you've probably used it yourself at some point where someone was...
Yeah, we've all done these things, you know, and that's why I want to stress, it's not, you know, we shouldn't shame ourselves because we've been conditioned to do these things, but if we can be aware of it, you know, and in a couple situation, if the couple can come together and unload their arsenal and say, you know, when I really want to control you, I will do the silent treatment, or I'll be passive aggressive, or...
Yeah, passive aggressive, what, define that for us.
So passive aggressive is if we're angry and we are afraid of showing our anger directly, then we do things surreptitiously. So we'll do the job, but we don't do it well. We make agreements and don't fulfill our agreements. We show up late. You know, all of these can be passive-aggressive behaviors where we're not, you know, and the silent treatment in a way is like a passive-aggressive behavior too.
You have something in your number 8 here saying all or never. Why is that a negative?
Well, it's an exaggeration, and it's not true. You know, when you say you always do that or you never do that, it's not really true. And if we can just stay with what's going on right now, like this is what's happening right now, and all or never tries to put it in a state of just shaming the other person, saying you never do that, you never open the door or whatever, which may not be true, and instead of putting out a straight request.
Yeah. So there's an element of hyperbole there where the exaggeration is because the man didn't fix dinner that night, or you never fix dinner.
Right.
And he may have fixed dinner 500 times, but it's just the exaggeration.
Right. And to the like, there's a child inside. To the child inside, it seems like it's always or never, you know, but it's in reality. And then they might get into an argument about whether it is always or never, and that's not really the point.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say the child inside, because we've all seen this book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. You've seen. I think that has nothing to do with it. I think women grow up, men don't. To me, that's my easy analysis of why there are problems between men and women. Here's an interesting thing that happens very commonly: using the opinions of others. My mother always said you were a bum.
You're right.
How can that work to your disadvantage?
Well, you know, it puts someone else on the defensive, you know, and instead of just staying with, you know, my feelings and what's going on for me, it's saying, you know, not only do I think you're a bum, but everyone else does, or your mother does, or, you know, you're just like your mother or your father, or things like that. Those are dominating behaviors that only serve to put the other person on the defensive.
Okay. Now we have threats and withdrawal of, we're going to cover each of these: money, sex, and support.
Right.
So let's start with the threats. How would that manifest itself?
Yeah, so someone says, well, if you're going to be that way, then I'm not going to have sex with you tonight. That may be explicitly said or maybe surreptitiously put out there.
That's not uncommon, right?
No.
That withholding behavior, or the
Right.
man might say, well, I'm not going to give you the household allowance this week
Right.
because you were nasty to me. And that's that withholding behavior.
Right.
And sex is a commonly used withholding behavior.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Sex
more,
and
it would
love.
seem, yeah, it would seem like
Yeah.
more from the woman withholding it from the man in my imagination. But I guess it could be the man saying, I'm not going to have sex with you either.
Could go either way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And support, obviously, either side could be afraid that emotional, psychological,
Right.
economic support could be withdrawn
Right.
unless they acquiesce to whatever. Okay, grudges.
Yes.
My dad had this group of guys that he played golf with for 30 years, every week. And one week he got in traffic and they didn't wait for him. He never talked to him again. 30 years he knew these guys, a bunch of dentists. And they didn't wait for him and he said, that's it. Talk
Wow.
about grudges.
Well, it hurts us. The same thing goes with forgiveness. Forgiveness, I think, is about accepting people for who they are, and we all have many different parts, and we make mistakes, you know. And so, you know, a lot of people think if I don't forgive them, then I can control what they're doing and also control the feelings that come up for me. So, if we have an old feeling of betrayal that may go way, way back, and someone doesn't show up to pick us up, it touches on that really deep sadness that may be associated with the past feeling. And so we think we're protecting ourselves by saying, I'll shut them out of my life, you know, but then people end up shutting people out of their lives and being alone.
Yeah, it's interesting because my son's an attorney here in town, and he had some litigation recently where business partners, you know, didn't do what they were supposed to do, and in the voir dire, in the asking of the jury, they asked the jury members, "Have you ever been betrayed by somebody?" It was an interesting, because we all have at some point, and I don't think that feeling of betrayal ever totally goes away.
It doesn't unless we really start taking really good care of ourselves. I don't think that we can forgive someone else as long as we're not being in integrity with ourselves. But I think as we learn to be more integrity, to set good boundaries, to be able to be open to learning in a situation, then it's less, we're running around with a lot less fear.
So grudges are ultimately not going to help you. Just get rid of them, let them go, let it go.
Totally. Well, it may not be just about letting go. There may be some exploring about what's going on and what's happening on a deeper level. So it's, and I think, in fact, a lot of churches and ministers and therapists say you should forgive. And yes, lack of forgiveness hurts us, but there's a process, an organic process that can happen of our getting to the place where we can accept someone for who they are and accept our own weakness and forgive ourselves for our own humanness too.
Right. I guess part of it is that none of us are perfect. So
that's right.
This idea that you're so perfect and the other person was. What about the concept of right and wrong? I see that a lot. Well, you know, someone will say something and they say, "Am I right?" It's like right or wrong probably has very little to do with it.
Right. Yeah, we want to feel that we want to believe that we're right and that there is a right or wrong. And what I've seen is that there's good reasons why everybody does what they do. And it's if we take it out of the realm of right or wrong, then there might be something to learn for us about ourselves and about what I call, you know, when we were very young, I think we went into person training. We were taught if you do these things, then you're good and you're lovable, and if you don't do those things, you're bad and you're unlovable. And we carry that with us, and we develop our own inner critic that tries to hide the shadow, that if we're going to get love, we need to push away and hide the shadow, and then we project it onto other people. And so, you know, ultimately, again, it doesn't work, but when we can learn about that and make peace with our shadow, then someone says, you're whatever their judgment might be, you're selfish, and you may say, yeah, there is a part of me that's selfish, and you don't have to defend yourself. You just see that that's a part of your shadow.
Ultimately, aren't all these behaviors, though, about each of us trying to get what we want?
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
so we all want what we want, but sometimes you don't want to admit to yourself, you say, well, I'm sort of this high-minded person, and I'm interested in the integrity and the love of the relationship, but it's not about me. But frequently, a lot of these behaviors are about us.
Yes. Yeah, they are. They definitely are. And I think ultimately what we're wanting is to feel self-esteem, to feel love, to feel whole within ourselves. But we have a lot of symbols that we were taught. If you get money, then you're lovable, or if you get this thing, then you're lovable. And so we go for that without seeing what's underneath it and what that's all about.
We do want to be loved.
We do.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
There's nothing like having someone love you. That's why your mother's so perfect, because she'll love you no matter what.
Sometimes.
What about sometimes? What about interrogation? What does that mean?
Interrogation is instead of exploring with someone and saying, I'm sure there's a good reason why you did that, and I'd like to learn more about what's going on for you or what results you were looking for. So you're in a mode of wanting to learn. So as opposed to that, interrogation is a dominating technique, which is, why did you do that? But there's really not an intention to learn there.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's
there's an intention to dominate.
Yeah. And finally, gossip.
Yeah.
Gossip is always, there's an old saying, which I got it on my email one day, where Aristotle and Plato were talking, and it's a joke, but it says basically, Aristotle's talking to Plato, and he says, I have something I want to tell you. And Aristotle says, before you tell me, does it meet my 3 criteria? And Plato says, well, what are the criteria? He said, well, number 1, do you know for sure that it's true? And Plato says, well, no, I don't really know for certain. And he says, well, number 2, is it something good? And he said, well, no, not really. And then he said, number 3, and what's number 3 is that, is there some social purpose that would come out of telling me? And he said, no, not really. He said, well, then I don't want to hear it. And that's how Aristotle never found out that Socrates was banging his wife. Just a joke. All right. So anyway, let's get back to the gossip. Gossip is just generally not helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it's an intention, again, to diminish difficult feelings within us. So let's say that I have a difficult relationship with Fred, and whatever Fred is doing touches off feelings of low self-esteem in me. So my belief is, if I can go to someone else and make Fred wrong and they agree with me, that diminishes how I feel badly about myself around Fred.
All right. So now we've sort of categorized the ways that people don't fight fair, right? We've got those listed now.
Right.
Controlling behaviors, blame, shame, and guilt, name calling, diminishing and condescending remarks, yelling and hitting, silent treatment, passive aggressiveness, breaking agreements, forgetting or doing jobs poorly, saying all or never, using opinions of others, threats and withdrawal of money, sex, and support, grudges, interrogation, and gossip. Those are the things that people do wrong. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to find out from Lee Shapiro, the relationship guy, how to do it right. We're coming right back. Bovino. We're back with H. Lee Shapiro, the relationship guy. 30 years of teaching people how to get along fairly, because we all use our little manipulative, unfair techniques to try to get a little advantage. We all want some advantage in those relationships, don't we?
Right.
So we went through a long list in the early part of the show about things that people do wrong that lead to failures maybe in relationships. Let's start with the strategies that work, the things that can help you to solve problems in your relationships without going down the wrong path. So start with exploration, intent to learn and heal. What does that mean?
Well, first of all, I want to say that it's not about doing it wrong. It's that we've been conditioned to do a lot of things that in the short run give us some results, but in the long run don't really give us the connection, the satisfaction that we're looking for. So it's really interesting to explore what really works. So one thing is an exploration, when our intention is, instead of trying to just protect ourselves, when our intention is to learn, to heal heal those patterns that keep us from being alive. There's an entirely difference that happens in the exchange with the other person. An example of that, I remember one time years ago I was married, and my wife was shopping in Aspen and bought what I thought was a very expensive dress, and it hooked my fear of not having enough money. And I was trying to control her to get her to return the dress. So my fear of not having enough money was then meeting her fear of being controlled, and we were in a power struggle. And then at a certain point in that exchange, I realized that I was doing what my dad did with my mom and tried to control her around money. And it was not a behavior I wanted to perpetuate. So I said to Joyce, you know, I'm doing my dad here, and I don't want to do my dad, and I'd like to explore what's underneath my trying to control you. Can you hold for me, which means can you listen while I explore what the feelings are underneath this behavior? Well, as soon as I said that, Joyce said, you know, the dress isn't that important, I can return it. And I said, you know, keep it, return it, do whatever you want, but what I want to do is I want to heal this pattern. I don't want to perpetuate.
Yeah, and we all fall into those patterns, and I can sort of see them in myself also.
Oh, yeah.
But once you start to really analyze them. I had a friend once whose wife went to the orthodontist and got braces put on as an adult. Yeah, she might have been 40 at the time.
Right.
And she came home with the braces, and he just said, go back and take them off. I don't want you to have those braces. And it just seemed like ridiculous that he wouldn't want her to have straight teeth. It wasn't a cost issue with them. He just didn't see the need for it, and it caused a huge fight between them.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so instead of doing that, if he could have been conscious enough to be able to say, you know, boy, I noticed this is touching off some difficult feelings for me. I notice I'm wanting to control you right now, and I also know that my trying to control you is going to have consequence. So I'd like to explore what's going on for you around that, what's going on for me around that. Why do I have such strong energy about wanting to get you to take off the braces, you know? And when the two people can come together and really explore those underlying feelings and bringing healing to those parts, it's a whole different energy.
How about a straight request?
Okay.
That seems so obvious, but most people, they
No.
can't say what they really want.
Right. A part of that is sometimes they don't know what they really want. And part of it, too, is that they may have a belief that unless I shame that person or control them or manipulate them, that I'm not going to get my needs met. So we do these bizarre things to try to get what we want instead of just putting out a straight request and saying, would you be willing to do this? And, you know, it's far more likely that they are willing to do that if that's our intent, you know.
So in this example, if the husband feels that he hasn't been getting any attention from his wife or girlfriend, or guy from his girlfriend, and then he can go and light candles and put some incense and have a bottle of wine, or he can just say, do you feel like having sex tonight? That's probably as good as a straight request, right?
Yeah, and one thing that's important with a straight request, too, is being very specific. So sometimes people say, you know, I want to feel more loved from you, or I want to feel like I'm loved. You know, if you can instead talk about the behaviors that you're looking for, like, boy, you know, when you light those candles for me or make me a dinner or something like that, boy, that just touches my heart, and I love when you do that, you know.
Yeah.
So it's very specific, and it's important to have that because a lot of times for men and women, doing loving behavior may be really different, and one person's love language might be different than another's. For one person, it might be feeling getting acknowledgement. And for another person, it might be a gift or, you know, so there's a lot of different things. So putting it out very specifically what you're wanting is very helpful.
Men and women are different that way.
They are.
Yeah. Give us, in your experience, what are the differences in the communication styles and what happens between men and women?
Boy, there's so much to that, you know, of different styles of communication, and you know, one is learning to listen, and you know, for us guys, if I come to you as another guy and I talk about a problem I'm having, what I'm also saying is I'd like to get your input and I'd like you to help me solve my problem. But a lot of times for women, they just want to talk about it. They want to be heard, and they can figure it out for themselves. And guys think they're asking for me to take control and to handle it for them, and they may not be. So, you know, a lot of times I'll check it out, when my girlfriend may be complaining about something or whatever, and I'll say, you know, are you wanting input? Are you wanting some support? Or you just want to be heard right now, you know?
It's a key feature, and actually listening is a skill.
It is.
Anybody who thinks that you just listen normally, you don't, because when someone, frequently, someone's talking and you're thinking about the game or, you know, what you're doing tonight, or it's listening and actually really hearing what people say is a skill that I would say the majority of people don't have.
Right, right. And there's another aspect to that too, and that's what I call getting with the other person. So I remember one time my girlfriend, a previous girlfriend, said to me, I don't feel like you're hearing me. Well, I could have repeated word for word what she just said. So I heard the words, but and I looked at that like, you know, I wonder why she's saying that. And what I realized, I was taking what she was saying as blame. And when I feel blamed, boy, this armor comes up for me.
Right.
And so I wasn't with her. I was energetically, I was defensive, even though I understood every word she said. And so I checked that out with her, and I said, I think what you're saying is that you're not feeling me in compassion with you. It's not that I don't understand what you're saying. And she said, that's correct, you know. So I said, you know, I'm feeling blamed right now. I need to go take a time out. We'll talk about time out, and breathe and get myself back to center, because I really want to hear you. And right now I'm feeling very defensive.
What about positive vision? What is that? How can we use that technique when the next time there's a conflict?
Yeah, so a lot of times people in their own minds or in talking with the other person talk about negative visions, about what negatively is going to happen. And instead of doing that, if we create a positive vision and we find that we're both on the same page in terms of what we're wanting to accomplish, you know, then we can focus on that and not on the negative parts. So
I have somebody, a friend who, he always reacts poorly to when someone tells him, you need to.
Right.
Why does he react poorly to that?
Well, there's an energy of control.
You need to, boy, that's
right.
that's like putting a hot poker up his butt when he hears that.
Or someone says to you, you know what's wrong with you? I mean, who's going to say what? I really want to know what's wrong with you. I love getting judged.
No, I have a friend who always says, you know one thing I like about you? And I always say, what? He says, nothing. Win-win.
Win-win.
I mean, that's sort of a euphemism, but
right.
why can we apply that in relationships?
Well, win-win is if we do have a positive vision of what, you know, finding what we're both really wanting here. Then we can find solutions where we both can have a sense of winning, you know. And so that's basically what that's about. And it's often very possible to find that where there is some compromise, or, you know, I can give this up and you can give that up, and we'll find a way that we can both feel like we haven't compromised ourselves and we're both feeling good and that we've won.
Are there circumstances where you meet, let's say, a couple who are having a problem, and you realize there's so much bad blood between these people that they might just be better off separate?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
In other words, staying together isn't always the best choice. Sometimes it's a logical choice to say we're so different or we're so conflicted that maybe we shouldn't be together.
Absolutely. You know, and a lot of times people find they get divorced and they find they become best friends with their ex-partner, and because they don't have the same dynamics going on in the relationship when they're in a romantic configuration, and they become best friends. So, you know, find what's really loving. And also just because we connect with someone or we're attracted to someone is not a reason to necessarily have a romantic relationship. The appropriate relationship may be a really good friendship.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I had a secretary once, 30 years ago, and she had, I swear I'm not making this up, she had married and divorced and remarried the same guy 3 times. She couldn't live with him. She couldn't live without him.
Right, right.
And you wonder, I can understand maybe doing it the second time, but the third time, it's pretty impressive. One of them had a big hold on the other. I don't know which was which. But it's interesting to me that when you talk about couples, you know, that and a lot of times it's just being together all the time. They'd do better if they were apart a little bit.
Right, right. And I think sometimes separations are very important. in terms of, it depends on the people, but some people are happier having their own space at times and having their own activities. And for some people, so there's differences. And to be able to work that out is part of relationships, because one person might have a need to be together more and one person may have a need for separation more. So,
do you really believe, Lee, that people change, that people can change?
I think people can learn, and I think people can be, let me speak about myself. So what I've seen is that I've learned a lot in relationships, in teaching the seminars and in doing the work. So I'm far more conscious, I think, of difficult situations when they come up. And so then I can say things like, I can see that I'm wanting to control you right now, rather than just acting out the controlling. So things can change.
There's an old joke that there's only one time you can change a man, and that's when he's still in diapers. And
you have to want to change. There's a joke too that how many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? Only one, but the light bulb has to want to change. So.
And how many Aspenites does it take to change a light bulb? 100. 1 to change the light bulb, and 99 to talk about how good light bulbs used to be.
That's great.
What's a timeout?
Okay, timeout. When both people are in an energy of fear and they're trying to control each other, it's like we've taken our wounded children and put them in the sandbox and they're throwing sand at each other. That's a good time to take a time out. And if you can have an agreement with your significant other or partner, whatever, and say, when I am in a place where I'm feeling very defensive, this may be the best I can do. And what that means is I need to go and work on my stuff and to get back into my center. And then let's come back together in an hour or whatever, and we can explore what got touched off there. But right now, all I want to do is my intention just to control you, and I know that's not going to work.
And is the do-over, is that on the same theme?
Do-over is different. Do-over is where you actually go through a ritual of doing it over again. I mean, we're human, we're going to make mistakes. And it's really fun to do that. In fact, one time experience I like to share about, one time I lived at Hunter Creek, and my wife had crashed the truck. And she came to me very sheepishly and said, when I knocked on the door and she opened the door, and she said, I crashed the truck. And she was in this state like that she was this little girl and she did something wrong and her dad was coming home and she was in trouble. You know?
She was going to get chastised.
She was, yeah. And I went, subconsciously, I went right into doing her dad. And she said, I crashed the truck. And I said, well, where did it happen? And she said, out in front of Hunter Creek. And then I said a very parent-to-child type of communication. I said, didn't I tell you to watch out for that spot? That's the way a parent talks to a child. Right. So she said, yeah, you did, And then I went into complaining and said, oh, now our insurance rates are going to go up. And then I caught
just made her feel bad, worse than she did. She already felt bad.
Right. So I just really wanted to lay it on. Again, there was another controlling mechanism. And then I caught myself and I said, this doesn't feel good. Can we do this over again? And she lit up and she said, yeah, let's do it over. And I walked outside the door. I knocked on the door. She opened the door and she said, I crashed the car. I said, are you okay? She said, I'm fine. I said, looks like, that must have been upsetting for you. Would you like a hug right now? She said, I would love a hug. And I gave her a big hug. And it felt great.
Oh, that's a great story.
We did it over again. And I got to feel good about it, and she got to feel good about it. And, as I say, it's important to recognize that we're human. We're going to make mistakes, but we can do it over. We can clean it up. We can go to the person that we've hurt in some way and say, I was really being defensive and I was trying to protect myself, and that's not really how I like to show up. And if I've hurt you, I really apologize for that.
Yeah.
It's not hard to do.
What about I statements? What does that mean?
I statements is about taking responsibility. So it's not, you made me feel angry. It's I noticed that when you do that, it touched off some difficult feelings for me. And it's staying with what's happening over here and not focusing on them. It's taking full responsibility for my experience.
Okay, I like that.
That works real well.
It's hard for us to take responsibility because somebody else must have caused them. Couldn't have been us.
Right.
Well, this has been a fascinating hour. H. Lee Shapiro, Fighting Fair in Relationships. He gives a seminar. If you want to give him a call, 925-5035. Very nice guy. Hawaii and Aspen.
Yes.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Fight fair in your relationships. We'll see you next week.
We covered it all.
We did.